And here we go. This is a whole bunch of bottles of silicone shock oil. These are specifically made by RC companies for use in RC vehicles. These are not off-the-shelf oils that you'll find in a hardware store or anything like that. These are very specifically formulated for use with RCs, and they're available from multiple manufacturers, and they come in different weights or thicknesses. So all of these here are from one manufacturer, Team Losi, and you can see that they have the numbers on the top. Those represent the weight of the oil. The higher the number, the thicker the oil is, which means it will have more resistance on the action of the spring and the action of the suspension. To show you the difference that weight makes, or thickness of the oil makes, I'm just going to turn this around and let you see the level of it. Just look at the top as I shake it around. See how it looks kind of thin? It's able to pour out pretty easily, and that's because this is a very thin oil. This is 10 weight oil. And now looking over at some thicker stuff, this is the real thick stuff. This is 90 weight, made by a different company. You can just see it's filled up to here, and as I turn it, it's moving a lot more slowly because this is a thicker or more viscous oil. Now, to really show you the difference, I'm going to show you some super thick silicone oil. Now, this is not used for shocks. This is actually used for differentials. It's a completely different component, but I just want you to see, watch the bubble on this one. See how slowly it's moving? That's how thick silicone oil can get. And as a matter of fact, it can get up to 10, even 50 times thicker than that. Now for springs. This is something that I like very much. It's one of my drawers of springs. Now, springs, specifically made for RCs, are available in different lengths and different levels of stiffness. So over here, I've got some really soft springs. It's pretty easy to compress. Compare that over to this side where I've got a much stiffer spring. Yeah, significantly stiffer. The difference between these two springs that I just showed you is about 2 times. So this is about twice as stiff as the previous one. Now, different companies use different methods for indicating the stiffness of a spring so that you can tell just by looking at it what you've got. In this case, both of these springs are from a company called Losi, and they code their springs in this size by color. So the different colors mean different stiffnesses, and in this case, it's the gray is it's either the gray or the white is the very weakest that they offer, going all the way up to the black. The black is actually the stiffest in this case. And springs are also available in different lengths. So here I've got some orange springs, but they're in different lengths. They're both from the same company, but they're available in different lengths. In this case, these longer ones, which are 2.5 inches long, are made to be used on the rear of a truck or a buggy in 1/10 scale. These shorter ones are 2 inches long, and they're made to be used for also a truck or buggy, but for the front of it. Some companies don't use such an obvious scheme for showing you what is the rating of a different spring, especially nowadays for racers. Racers tend to not like to let other people know what they're using on their vehicles. So here I've got 2 springs from the same company. One of them is just a little bit longer than the other, but these have very different spring rates to them. The one on the left is much softer, the one on the right is much stiffer. And you'll notice that they're both almost all white except for just these little dots. So in this case, the little red dot, which you can kind of turn away and hide with some of the other components, it makes it so that your competitors at a racetrack won't necessarily be able to easily see what type of springs that you're using for your setup. The red in this case means it's the softer one, and the black means it's the most stiff spring rate. As I mentioned before, the springs on a vehicle are for holding it up, holding its weight up off the ground, and also keeping it from leaning too much in turns. If you had very, very soft springs on a vehicle, For one thing, it's not going to be able to hold up the weight. It would just kind of drag along on the ground. And also when you go into a turn, the whole thing would just lean way over. So that's basically, in a nutshell, what your springs are going to be doing. Your springs are not to help you to land big jumps. Your springs are just there to hold the vehicle up and to keep it at a certain level height that you want it to be at. Now, speaking of height, there are a couple things that I want to show you. First of all, as I just mentioned, the stiffness of the spring will determine how well the suspension is able to hold up the entire vehicle. But there are a couple other things that factor into the height of the vehicle off of the ground. First of all, spring length. Now I'm going to show you two springs of practically the same level of stiffness attached to the exact same shock. Now here's my shock assembled with the longer one of those springs. You can see that the shock is fully extended out and it's ready to do its job. Now, given that amount of height of spring and the stiffness or rate of the spring, when you put weight on this vehicle, it's going to sit at a certain level. Now, compare that with this full-length shock, with the full-length spring, to when I take this spring off and replace it with the shorter spring. Now, you can already see that there's a problem here. This spring is too short. What that's going to do is let the whole vehicle sit much lower to the ground. But in this case, it also is leaving a whole bunch of this space down here where basically the shock is going to be working, but the spring isn't going to be doing any work at all. And as the vehicle goes around over bumpy terrain, the spring could even completely fall off to the side and just really stop working well. But there's something that you can do to help deal with a spring that's too short, and also to help set your height of your vehicle where you want it to be. And that is to use spring preload.